What's up, everybody? You're listening to episode number 2 of Just Breathing with Laud Lungs. I am joined again by my wife, Brittany, and I'm excited to have another conversation with her. We're going to talk about a lot of things, I hope. It is late. It is after the kids have gone to bed. You are joining us, if you're watching this, in our dining room, at our dining room table. So welcome to dinner. Mm-hmm. This is our
everything table.
Yeah, this is our portable after the kids have gone to bed podcast setup, and you'll probably be seeing more of this in the future, and that's all good. So, thank you again for being here. I kind of wanted to, if you don't mind, I kind of wanted to focus in on something that has been in the news a little bit lately. And no, I'm not talking about all the riots and protests and things like that. And no, I'm not talking about COVID. We can talk about that another time. And if that comes up in the conversation, great. I'm totally fine with having those conversations. But I really wanted to talk about something that's been going around. And there was just a press conference recently by a couple people regarding the human trafficking, which is something that you know a little bit about and you're kind of passionate about. And if you don't know, Brittany is a volunteer leader with an organization called F.R.E.E. And can you just tell people a little bit about that?
So F.R.E.E. is a nonprofit organization, and our main goals in that organization is to raise awareness about human trafficking, mostly to prevent it. We also are raising money for a home because the biggest need is housing. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the biggest need all around, but especially in our county. That's what the coalition has told us, that they, when police find a girl that's being trafficked, they don't have anywhere to put her. So that's a really big need. So we're raising money for that. And we also provide care for them off the street. So we have a drop-in center just to kind of have a place for them to come to get basic needs, food and toiletries, and just to hear love, hear truth, and have a safe place to go. So no males are allowed in the drop-in center. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Yeah.
That's not a very professional
no, that's good
explanation,
that's good.
But
a lot of
but
people,
it's late.
A lot of people, I'm sure, and I know because of attending some of your events, especially at the beginning, right when you joined, F.R.E.E. was more of an awareness group. Mm-hmm. They become a little more actionary. They become a little more hands-on in their approach. But at the beginning, it was just informing people that this was a real thing. Mm-hmm. And we know personally, right now, I don't know where everybody is listening to this, but we're located in Reading, Pennsylvania. There is a Reading, California. We're in Reading, Pennsylvania, like Reading, Pennsylvania. It's on the Monopoly map, so it's a real place. But there's been a lot of human trafficking that has gone on in our city. Mm-hmm. So it's not a organization that you're a part of that really is doing something for some faraway place. Right. This is something that's happening right here in our own city, in our own county, and around us. There was just recently one in Malvern, which is not that far from us. But yeah, I mean, so F.R.E.E. started as an awareness group and I think where I just wanted to start is just the fact that human trafficking exists, and it exists in our country, sadly. And can you just make people a little more aware of kind of what goes on in our country right now? Because a lot of people are just not aware of that.
Well, I think the hardest thing about human trafficking is that it looks so different in so many different places. Like when we think of human trafficking, we usually think of like another country, and it's, very obvious. You think of the movie Taken, and that's what you think about as human trafficking. But here in the States, I mean, it looks different usually, and it can be as simple as, you're a young girl and you haven't had a great home life, and you meet someone, and you meet a boy who's cute and he's kind and he's helpful, and he takes advantage of that, and he kind of tricks you into just kind of breaking down your boundaries until you're in a point where you think he cares about you, but obviously he doesn't, because he's trafficking you now. And sometimes it's slow like that. Sometimes it's kind of like deceiving, and then a break, they break you. And sometimes you are a runaway, and you are kind of kidnapped or coerced into trafficking. So it looks different for so many people. You can be trafficked in your home. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go across state lines. You can be in your own home, and your parents could be selling you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's
and that happens. I mean, that's some of the crazy stories that I've heard at some of your events, and just looking into it myself. I mean, we kind of read about that in like maybe ancient stories or in the Bible, or you hear about horrific stories about in Africa. This was a common event where if they were too poor, they would sell their children.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It happens a lot of places like
yeah, and there's a lot of poor people in this country.
Yeah.
And that same practice is still going on. It's mind-blowing. It really is.
I think the biggest thing to know, and this is becoming more public, so that's good, but it's the force, fraud, or coercion that it really helps define it. And then an exchanging of something of value.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's important.
Well, I saw you post something about, and man, we're just getting into it in this podcast. Here we go. But I saw you post something about a petition to shut down Pornhub.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I even saw somebody in the comments, which was a little silly, but just kind of, a lot of people look at porn as completely a choice occupation. Mm-hmm. And that's been the most convicting thing to me as a man. Mm-hmm. And probably to every guy listening to this podcast, is I never knew how many women on these porn sites are there through trafficking.
Right.
Especially in the foreign countries, but also in the United States.
Right.
There's a lot. I mean, there is millions of videos out there, and a huge portion of those are from women that are trafficked.
Oh yeah. I could go off on porn. It's so destructive. Yeah. It makes me so upset, because it's not only is it upsetting for the trafficking part, because I read that article, and it's so easy for you to post something on Pornhub. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to be anyone. You just kind of fill out the form and not identify yourself, and then they're like, okay, you can post it. Yeah. They have no idea what happened to get that video. Oh. And so that upsets me, that people are being exploited. And then also it upsets me because I love my men and my boys, and I respect the men in this country, and I don't want them looking at that, because that's going to destroy their relationships with their mothers and their sisters and their daughters and their wives. And there's so many reasons why it's so destructive. And so when I saw that petition to close it down, I was like, yeah, I'll sign that.
Yeah. It's such an interesting conversation, and I've listened to a lot of guys debate this topic. Not a whole lot of women in the conversation, so that could be a problem. But I've even heard women kind of make the case for porn and for the kind of the innocent nature of porn and how.
Well, I feel like you can't even mix that word in.
Yeah, I mean,
innocence in porn. I'm like, what?
Well, there's a lot of people who will try to who will definitely acknowledge it as an addictive to some degree, an addictive
because it is
practice, as much as drugs, as much as alcohol, anything like that. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to really put into words and sort of have people wrap their minds around the destructive sort of elements that porn can really produce in your life, because it's not tangible. And I think,
right.
You know what I mean? Like it definitely affects your relationships.
Right.
It definitely will affect your sex life. It definitely will affect so many different areas. And I mean, the most horrific part is how young boys and girls are being exposed to porn nowadays. I mean, the average age is 8 years old. Yeah. I mean,
I can't
that's
stomach
awful.
that.
Well, and I've heard, I mean, we have like a huge, man, I'm just digging it tonight. But we have a huge issue with, well, I'm not even gonna get into that issue. We'll stick with this for right now. But we have a huge issue with that, with children being exposed to this at such an early age, not getting education in all of this stuff until later on. So now they're just figuring this stuff out with their friends, which is very destructive, and it leads to a lot of different
wrong understandings
and actions too.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's a bad thing, but I think the major way that we should be able to fight this, and we'll kind of come full circle to what's been in the news lately, is through focusing on these things as a means of propagating human trafficking. If you destroy the human trafficking industry, the sex trafficking industry, you're going to really dismantle a huge portion of the porn industry. And that's awesome.
Right.
That's awesome. Then those
almost the porn has to come down first. I mean, you're going to address all of it because it's injustice, but the porn just leads up to the trafficking, because your typical person, I would think, is not going to say one day, I want to rape someone.
Right.
They're already on that road through porn, until they get to a point where the most violent of the porn isn't enough, or whatever it is that they're looking for isn't enough, and then they have to go to a person. And so
that's a hard thing. That's what a lot of guys won't really acknowledge who have an issue with porn, is the progression. We just think, oh, well, I always had those thoughts, or I always wanted to see that thing.
Right.
But there is a progression.
Yeah.
There is that. I mean, it's the same thing. Like I said, with drugs and alcohol, there's a progression.
Right.
And it leads further and further until you have to completely remove yourself and detox yourself from that, just like any other substance, dopamine inducing stuff, substance. But yeah, there was a huge thing that happened this past week where the Trump administration, I think through Ivanka Trump, I'm pretty sure she's the one that's kind of heading up this fight against human trafficking in the United States, especially. They just allocated $35 million, which it's so funny because in the scheme of all the money that we're spending right now, seems so little now,
right?
Because we're dishing out trillions. But yeah, $35 million is an awesome, awesome start. And it's really focusing on what you guys are working towards with safe houses.
Right.
Because
that is the major need. And they even said that in that press conference.
Yeah, I think Bill Barr was talking about that, how there wasn't, man, I forget the numbers that he threw out but there's just such a shortage of homes.
Right.
So like when a police officer, usually through prostitution, will pull someone out of a trafficking situation, they have nowhere to send them.
Yeah. And the big thing is because a lot of people, and I totally understand why they think this, they're like, well, why can't they just go to a women's shelter?
Yeah.
And it's not that simple. If it was that simple, that would be so amazing. But these women have been through so much trauma that just a women's shelter, they can't cope. They need a lot. They need intensive care.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's not enough. If there's not enough housing that is able to give that intensive care specifically to those women, and those women will do better knowing that they're not alone, because that sort of trauma makes you feel alone, and you don't want to talk about that kind of shame. Mm-hmm. So when you know that I'm not the only one, and that lie gets, out the window, then it's a little bit easier to start that healing process.
Mm. Yeah. It's amazing to me in our social justice age. And I think social justice is a load of crap. Honestly. But I say that because there's a real justice issue that is ailing our country, ailing the world right now. And it's amazing to me that we can focus on so many petty things, so many things that don't even actually that aren't really there statistically, but we can hone in on these things. But when we have the stats for what's going on in our country in terms of people actually being enslaved, we're fighting for past slavery right now. Right. And there's definitely a conversation that needs to be had there. Right. But there is actual slavery still happening in our country. Right. And all of these social justice warriors that are for women, the predominance of sex trafficking is against women. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have, actual oppression going on. I mean, these women are enslaved. They have they can't speak. They can't act without their pimp. They can't think and live for themselves. Right. And just the fact that we don't get the press and the attention on this subject is so frustrating to me, because it's such an issue that our country should come together on and should try to eradicate. Right. If there's, we eradicated the sin that we started with when we eradicated slavery. Right. And then we didn't get rid of it completely. So we fought and we eradicated that second sin of the Jim Crow laws, the redlining, all the civil rights issues that we fought so hard for. We corrected those sins of our country's past, but there still is this one sin that is holding on to us, and it's such a powerful sin. It's such a powerful, because it's so integrated into so many aspects of our culture. Right. I mean, sex sells is the slogan, and it's so true. And sex is everywhere.
Well, that's the
I mean, when you have sex on TV, it's hard to argue about why you shouldn't have porn. Right. I mean, these are the arguments. It's like you have Game of Thrones, and I couldn't even watch that show because the only time I ever saw it, boobs are hanging out. You're right. And I'm like, man, I'm trying to stay away from porn, and now I'm seeing boobs on TV. And how am I supposed to not relapse and go back into watching porn? Right. And this is people are probably not going to like me for that. That's okay. But it's a huge issue in our country. Right. And it's so cultural. Mm-hmm. It's so culturally relevant too.
It's such a weird thing too, because with our culture, you have some that are totally fine with being out loud about it. They don't think it's a problem at all. And then the people that are struggling, that maybe want to get on top of it, are too scared to ask for help for shame.
You're talking about the victims?
No, about porn.
Oh,
like the people who, watch, there's like people who watch porn, they don't care. They think that it's great and they'll say it to anyone that passes by them. But then you have other people who are struggling with it and want help because they know that it has a hold on them and that it's destructive, but they don't know how to get out of it because they fear the shaming on them. And it's just like this, it's that's why it's so hard to address and get rid of. And
I think that's an issue with a lot of things. I mean, there's definitely the shame aspect, mostly in the Christian circles. You'll definitely, if you come out and you try to say, hey, I have a problem with porn at church, I mean, people are going to look at you a little weird.
Right.
Even though we know from statistics that, 50% of Christians... No, it's more than that.
It's a surprising.
It's something.
Number.
No, it's something.
I can't remember the number.
I swear it's something in like the 70 percentile. 70% of Christian men look at porn. It's like 50% of pastors look at porn. So there's a lot of guilt that exists, which usually, when it's not you, will come out as shaming the person that does try to be truthful and say, hey, I'm struggling with this because you're guilty of it. And the church needs to get better at that. Yeah. We're supposed to be the people that desire you to bring your sin out into the open so that Jesus can do that healing work in your life so that he can cleanse you of all unrighteousness.
Amen.
And but that's in a lot of things too. I think, I've heard people in other podcasts talk about, their own porn addictions, and they're like really open about it, but it's almost, it becomes a joke.
Right.
And not to them. I mean, they really did struggle with it, but because people don't take it seriously.
Right.
They're like, hey, I'm glad that you're doing okay with not looking at it. But it shouldn't affect other people's lives.
Right.
Like like those people want it to stop at them. They're like, I'm not advocating for people to not look at porn. I'm like, well, it ruined your life.
Right. Why wouldn't you advocate against it?
They're sitting there saying how it ruined their relationships, and how they only could do that. They played video games and looked at porn, and it completely took over their life.
Yeah.
I mean, they were looking like 8, 12, 16 hours a day.
Oh my goodness.
At porn, and you're just like, maybe you should be an advocate for like, hey, this is not a good thing.
I think that's something
but what I'm trying to say is no one wants to put that on other people.
Right.
No one wants to be like, well, I had this issue, but if you have that issue, that's fine. It's not fine.
No, it's not.
And I think there's a big issue with that in our culture. We want everybody to be able to live their own life, do their own thing. And I do want that. I mean, from a total political standpoint, I want people to be free in this country to do what they want to do.
Right.
That is their right. That is their choice,
But when it comes to, from a political standpoint, when it comes to at the harm of another person.
Exactly.
Then that's when it stops.
Exactly. And I think that's back to the original thing. I think that's where the fight can really happen, is that, sorry guys, this isn't as innocent as you've been told. And the porn industry doesn't want you to know these things. The porn industry,
criminal activity is happening in the porn industry.
Right, exactly. There's they are a billion or $1 trillion industry. I think they do think they're untouchable. I mean, they're in so many different avenues now. I mean, the internet is basically porn.
Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? You can't even get away from it. Like, I deleted my Twitter account. I didn't really use it anyway. I hate Twitter. But, I deleted that because you can get porn on there.
Oh my goodness.
And like, that's amazing to me. They'll try to like censor opposing viewpoints on Twitter that they don't like, but they'll let you look at porn. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, that's
make cool.
Any sense.
That's cool. Yeah.
The things that you really want to censor, they're not censoring.
No.
Okay.
No. And Yeah, and Christians do get this bad rap, and I'm going back to Christians again, because they don't know how to, and this is the same problem I think with like conservatives in this country. They're terrible. They're like, they try to sell conservatism like accountants.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they try to give you the facts, they give you the stats, but they never get to your heart. Right. And that's one thing that the liberals and the, more of the left-leaning parties do, is that they really go for the emotion.
Right. It doesn't have to be true.
It doesn't have
to
be
fact.
No, it doesn't have to be true or fact, but it'll affect you in some way. Either you disagree with it and it'll piss you off, or you'll wholeheartedly agree with it and go burn down Portland. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, I mean, and that is an issue with the church. The church has for so long just been it's sin, it's unrighteousness, which no one knows what that means.
Right.
It's I don't know. I don't even know the phrases because the church hasn't really been fighting this fight.
No, we're all in our little religious circles doing the same things we've done forever.
Right. And there is a battle out there, and people are dying. Yeah. People are hurting. People are struggling. And the church isn't really stepping up to say, we have answers.
Right.
We want to alleviate this feeling that you have. A lot of, I totally know, just like I said, just from listening to, I've listened to many podcasts where guys have talked about porn, and it's funny to me because it's never, sometimes it's a conversation that they want to have, and they're, just kind of, just talking about it and kind of making a joke out of it and stuff like that. But most of the time they're talking about their struggles. Most of the time they're talking about how they've had to take a break from it. Most of the, so there's a struggle going on,
right,
that I think we would be justified in having that conversation,
right,
more.
Yeah.
I think we would be justified in saying, hey, I think there is a lot of people struggling with this. Would you like answers?
Right.
Would you like help?
Right.
Would you like assistance? Would you like to know about programs that you can put on your phones to keep you accountable from going back to this? Would you like to? And
there are programs out there that,
there's tons
to help people with that. You just got, and I wish that I remember, because there was this one program I heard about once and it sounded really good, but of course I can't remember what its name is now.
Yeah, there's Covenant Eyes, and they have a lot of ads I see on Facebook and Instagram and things like that. And they're pretty good. That's where you basically give your I don't even know how it works. It runs in the background, and it allows your accountability person, whoever you choose, to be able to see your search history for the internet and stuff. And just if you go somewhere that's flagged, your accountability person gets an alert, so they can contact you and be like, "Hey, man, what's going on?
Right,
you doing all right?"
Yeah.
And that's a cool program. I think there are many other things.
There's community based like help things too, like so that you're not just like those Covenant Eyes. That's awesome. But then to pair that with like getting in a community that's going to hold you accountable. Yeah. Like actual people.
I know people that have gone to AA. Like they've gone to Alcoholics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, something like that.
But they've gone to that for porn.
Oh, wow.
Just to get that, I guess those steps,
right?
To get that mindset and that community that you're talking about.
Yes.
Because it's so
community
hard.
Community is important.
I mean, if you don't tell someone about it, you're probably going to go back and look at porn again. If you don't put something in place,
right,
you're going to do it again.
Right.
And that doesn't make you a bad person. And I think I want to establish that too, because the church has done man, I'm ragging on the church so much tonight, but the church has not done an equitable, I don't know what the word is. They haven't done a good job at saying you're not a bad person
Right.
Your actions are bad.
Right.
And you need to fix those.
Right.
And you can fix those. And and the church needs to really take on a more positive and strong stance on these things.
Right. Or you could say it like this: you are a sinful person. That's why you need Jesus. So
but
your actions don't define you.
Yeah, go say that to like some random person.
I know they won't understand.
They'll
what
be
I'm
like,
saying.
"Are you about to hand me like a hell track? With some flames on it?" Yes. But yeah, I think this is a good conversation, and this is a conversation that I hope a lot of guys are listening to, and I hope a lot of women are listening to. I heard something the other day, and I had showed you a conversation that Jeremy guy was having regarding marriages and porn and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit because I want to get your thoughts on it, because obviously this is coming from a guy, but he was basically like, women shouldn't, oh man, now I'm going to forget his point, but basically they shouldn't judge.
They shouldn't control their husband and like make him stop.
Well,
that's what he was saying.
And force a confession out of him every time he looks at porn.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay. Like, I definitely understand the concept.
Right.
Especially from a biblical standpoint, like you are not judge and jury over your husband. You are, and it doesn't do anything to help him along by shaming him and making him, take the walk of shame and wife, I've sinned against you. What do you think of that?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of thoughts that go through my head. I think that he's right, but I understand why he said it that way, because from a woman's standpoint, it's like that feels so like if your husband or boyfriend is doing that, that feels awful to you. And you want to, like, part of you wants to know every time it happens, because that somehow makes you feel like you're in control. And it also, like, you want them to tell you because you want them to be sorry. But from what I've learned and from what I've read, like, about respect and, in God's point of view of where a woman stands when she's in a relationship with her husband, is like, I'm not in control of you. Like, my job is not to lead you. It's God's job.
Yeah.
So it's God's job to lead you, and you report to God. And that's scarier than to report to me, because I'm not in that place of authority anyway. So I think that's the hard part for women to understand, that our job is to, maybe if our husband needs help, we can say, hey, you need to go get help.
Right.
Or we're not going to pretend like we didn't see something. If we know our husband's up to something, we're going to, confront him, but it's not our job to, make you better. We say, go get help, and we're there for you to support you in getting that help, but not to shame you or not to, make you feel like a child.
Yeah. I think and for people that aren't Christians that are listening to this, I think you can also apply, in place of God, you could just apply a higher standard for your life.
Right.
I think every person should have kind of a standard of where they want to be and where they want to get to in their life.
Right.
And if they're not, attaining to those goals, or they're not, if they're falling short of where they want to be, where they want to see themselves, that's that same thing that should be leading you. You need to get back to that and say, where did I get off, and where do I need to get back on track? I also think too, to your point about, kind of your role and now getting back to Christianity, your role as a wife. I'm thinking of that, oh man, what's the one with Priscilla Shire?
Oh yeah,
the War Room movie.
The War Room movie, yeah.
Yeah, and that guy was struggling with, potential adultery, potential cheating on his wife, and his wife knew about that. I forget all the circumstances.
Through her friend and texting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, she chose to pray.
Yeah.
And there is something so powerful about praying for that change that you want to see in your partner, because what we know about prayer is prayer doesn't always change the other person. Prayer changes you.
Right.
And your change can affect everyone around you. Right. So it was the change in her life that affected her husband, and he saw the change, and he,
Well, when she prayed, if we're going to be specific,
yeah,
when she prayed, God did intervene in that situation.
Right, and he does.
But then, afterward,
he does.
He saw the change in his wife.
Right,
was totally caught off guard.
Right, and if that change wasn't in place, I don't think that scenario would have played itself out in that same way, because you could have made a mistake, but if he came home to a wife that was like, "Where you been? What are you doing? Were you with another woman? Were you cheating on me?"
Right.
He would have probably been like, "Yeah, and I might do it again."
Right.
And that's kind of the sad reality of it. I mean, like, but yeah, that change that needs to happen in us can affect everyone around you. I mean, that's something that, and again, I'll like move in and out of Christianity just for anybody that's not a Christian, because I want to show always that Christianity is an applied science. It's not this aloof kind of mystical magic thing. It's something that's grounded in very psychological and very grounded ideas.
Truth always plays itself out as true. And like, it's just the way it is.
Right. And Jordan Peterson, he's a, what is he? He is a clinical psychologist, I think. Clinical psychologist, I believe. Psychoanalyst. I don't know. But he helps people basically face their fears. He helps people basically learn how to better their own lives. So he's not sitting there saying, try this, do this. He's basically listening, giving leading questions, and helping people kind of solve their own problems. But he became kind of this big public speaker. He wrote a book, Best Times, New York Times bestseller, Best Times. Yeah. No, his book is called 12 Rules for Life. It's a good book. But he always talks about the fact that you need to be the change, and this is like an age-old concept, but you need to be the change that needs to happen, that you want to see in your world. You work on yourself. You work on your own life, and do what's good for your own life. And then he builds kind of this, he builds it out in such a cool way. He always says, and what's good for you needs to be good for your family. And then you try that out. And if it's not good for your family, you go back to yourself and say, what's in me that's not good for my family? And you work on yourself again. And then if it's good for you and good for your family, well, now it needs to be good for your community.
Right.
And then you try that out, and then you go back to square one and you fix what's wrong in you that's not good for your community, so that you're good for your family, your community, and it just keeps building out to your world.
Yeah. When you explained that to me like a day or so ago, and like I've been thinking about that since, because I'm like, that's such a true thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, if something isn't good for anyone involved, then it's the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's powerful.
Well, and that's
visual too.
A lot of the issues going on in our country is that everybody is focused on themselves and the good of themselves, but the good of themselves is not the good for their family.
Right.
A lot of their families are divided, and this is
their community.
Or for their community, but I mean, even just to bring it back to themselves, and then for their family, just to go to step one. A lot of these the people that we see out rioting right now, out doing a lot of these terrible things, are the most hurting people, because their life wasn't good for them. Their life wasn't good in their families. A lot of them, you know, had broken families. A lot of them didn't have a father in the household. That's a huge issue that's not talked about, you know, along with the human trafficking, getting back to that and just tying that back in. Right. I mean, a huge issue in our country that has led to a lot of these women getting sucked up into human trafficking, like you said, through coercion and through just a whole host of other factors that stems from a girl not having a father figure in the home, and then she tries to find that sometimes in the wrong guy. Right. And then it leads to other things, you know, and
or the father figure she has is not a good example.
And that
one that's in and out.
There's totally that too. But I think statistically right now in our country, our biggest struggle is fatherlessness.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's one of the, it's the biggest issue in the Black community. It's a huge issue in the white community and other racial groups, more so through divorce. The white community struggles greatly. Christians struggle greatly. To bring it back to them, there is a higher divorce rate with Christians than with other people. Now, you could argue that some of that is because a lot of people that aren't Christians don't get married as often as Christians do, and yada, yada, yada. But
it's still sad.
It's still extremely sad that the divorce rate is higher. Yeah. It's like, what are we doing? Yeah. You know, how are we not teaching people? And then to bring it back again, is it porn? How big of an issue is porn in marriages?
Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know.
I think it's definitely bigger than that, but yeah, it probably is a big problem.
Oh, it totally is bigger than that. It's about those people. It's not about the porn. Porn is just an object.
Right.
But yeah.
I think the one thing that I've been learning just recently is kind of what we were talking about earlier, but is the whole importance of like speaking truth that you believe for yourself and like helping others understand it. So what I mean is like, I'm usually that person who's like, I know how I want to live because I have good reasons for it, but I'm not going to push it on you. I don't want to ever push anything on other people, but I feel like I should do them the justice of like sharing it with them when I see them doing something totally like destructive to themselves. Like it would be loving for me to be like, you know what? There's a better way. Yeah. You don't have to choose that way. Yeah. But there is a better way that's beneficial for you and your family and the people that are around you. Well, and like it feels mean. It feels mean to say that because you're basically telling them what they're doing is wrong or not beneficial, but it's also not loving to just like let them continue to walk down that path. Right. And not tell them like,
well, it doesn't need to be aggressive, and it doesn't even need to be, you know, against them or an attack on them in any way. No, because it's
really to help them.
Well, but I don't even mean, it doesn't even need to be totally directed at them, but it needs to just be a conversation that's there.
Right.
You know, they need, because you'll never, I mean, everybody that's shouting in the news on both sides, conservative and left-wing, you know, news outlets that are just shouting all the time, you know, they're not changing anyone's minds.
That's true.
They're just speaking to the choir. You know what I mean? Everybody that watches those shows are either watching those shows to call out stupidity, you know, because they already hate those shows, or they're watching those shows because they believe everything that those people are saying. And you know, the conversations though that need to happen are just, well, this is what I've experienced in my life.
Right.
And it needs to be put out in a way that
is not confrontational.
Is definitely solid. Mm-hmm. You know, is definitely something that, you know, you can grasp and it can be applied to that person's life, but they have to pick it up.
Right.
You know, you're just kind of laying out the groundwork and saying, that's pretty good. Yeah. I mean, look at it. it looks pretty awesome.
Right.
You know, I mean, it worked for me, and look at my life.
Right.
You know, that should mean that you should have a life, you know, worth following.
Right.
People should be looking to you and saying, I want to be like that person.
Right.
You know, I mean, I do that all the time with people. I heard something today that was kind of it was a cool concept. It was like a way of taking jealousy and flipping it from a negative thing to a positive thing.
I've heard that. Or at least I think I have.
Yeah. And it's basically like when you look at somebody and you're jealous of them, flip it. And instead of just eating, like having that jealousy eat you alive and being like, oh, why don't I have that same stuff that person, or blah, blah, blah. Why don't I have that life? You know, you flip that and you say, I want that. Those are my new goals.
Oh.
You know, you're taking that jealousy and you're saying that must be something that affects me. There's a reason why I look at that person's life and I say, I want a life like that. What do I need to do? How do I need to motivate myself? How do I need to structure my own life to go in that direction? Right. What were you thinking?
Well, I'm contemplating what you just said.
Okay.
That I'm going to have to think on it, but I think that can be good and bad.
And bad? It can be bad.
I'm like thinking through what you're saying and I'm like, I don't know if that's all good, but I understand.
I think predominantly people aren't looking at, there's definitely envy.
Right.
And I think that deals more with like the material.
Like if you're looking at someone's marriage, if they have a really good marriage,
right?
You know, that is an honorable thing to say, hey, maybe like I want to make my marriage like that. You know?
Oh, totally.
Maybe what's wrong with
all those old couples in movies that are like walking hand in hand sitting on benches together, and you're just like, oh, jeez, I want that.
Yeah, that's adorable.
But
I think that's honorable, but not if you're, you know, it could go sideways too, I think.
Yeah.
But I was thinking so I heard this sermon a long time ago and it's changed my life. But the guy was talking about flipping things. And one of the things he said was jealousy. And he said, you know, if you're jealous of someone, so now we're going back to, you know, Christians, but if you're jealous of someone or, you know, I guess mostly someone, like find out how to bless them, like find out how to make them successful, like stop that mindset in its tracks and humble yourself and like, if it's in your ability, like make that, like help that person, like make them feel like accept that person. And I was like, whoa, like, that's a good challenge. Like if, you know, you find yourself, whatever, being jealous of someone, like instead try to accept them and make them successful. And that's been a challenge for me. Like
it's definitely like a love your enemies caliber endeavor. Yeah.
That's always a challenge for me. I want to get better at that. Like people around me who I wish that maybe like I was more like them just because like they're more talented than me. Like I want to instead accept them and try to make them more successful. Like be a part of. Yeah. Not that I'm going to like stop my own life, but like, you know, whenever I can, I want to elevate them, you know? And I think that's probably healthy for your heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I had heard, though. That's where I thought you were going.
No, that's a good concept. Now I'll have to think of that one because I'm still kind of processing that and thinking that through. Because the way my mind works is I always can come back and find everything that's wrong in every single statement, even if I agree with it. So right now I'm like, I'm picking that apart and being like, well, in this scenario. Yeah.
Because it like, if you think about it, like if you're jealous of someone's, I don't know, success or their talent, you're basically wanting that for yourself. Like you almost want to take that away from them and have it for yourself so that they're less than. That's really what you're feeling. You want them to be less than so that you can be higher than them and look and feel better. So the opposite of that is to say, no, because the truth is that I'm not any better than them and they're not any better than me. So I'm going to elevate them. I'm going to help them.
Okay.
I'm going to, I'm not going to try to be better than them.
Yeah.
Not that we try to be, like belittle ourselves, but we never want to climb on top of people
not
to
at
be
the
on top
cost of ourselves.
Right.
Elevate that person, but we'll grow as we invest in that person too. Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I think this is a good place to kind of wrap things up. That was a good conversation.
Yeah.
We got into a lot of different stuff there. One of the things that I really want to do later on in a future episode is have Andrea on, because I definitely think right now I really want to kind of push the momentum that's happening in our country in terms of we're getting more awareness, because if people are just glued to the news and they're not really looking at kind of the more justice oriented causes in our world, well, now it's in the news, and it's like now's the time that we really can kind of push this issue and really gain some more traction, get some more people involved. Everybody's hunkered down and ready to protest about something. So let's give people something that actually matters. And I did choose that word on purpose. So we'll have to get in touch with Andrea and see if she'll come on the podcast.
She's a much better talker than me too. She'll be able to
she's
say
been doing it for
better.
so long. No, you're great. But yeah, so we'll get her on the podcast. We'll have some more guests coming up soon. So all right, let's wrap it up. So thanks everybody for hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Let us know when we release this in the YouTube comments, in the iTunes comments, in the social media comments, wherever you're seeing this. Make sure to leave a comment. Tell us what you think of it. Tell us if you want us to talk about specific topics. I'm not really going into this podcast with any plan. We're just kind of, she knows. She had no idea what we're going to talk about today, and I like that. It's a little more natural, a little more free form. So, but let us know. And we'll be back on a future episode. Thanks for listening. We'll see you later. Bye.